Hello class, Miss Anderson here. Today we're doing 7.2a, which is parallelograms and special parallelograms, including area. So our essential question is, what are the key properties of parallelograms and how do we find the area of the parallelograms? So a reminder, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral. So remember, a quadrilateral means it has four sides, and then it gets the word parallelogram because both pair of opposite sides are parallel. And remember, we use this symbol to represent parallel lines. So this says that segment PQ is parallel to segment RS. So PQ and RS are parallel. And on our diagram, we mark the parallel lines with these arrows. Then we have QR is parallel to PS. So these sides are parallel. We use these triangles to mark the parallel lines. And so both pairs of parallel line, or both pairs of sides are parallel. It is a parallelogram and it's a quadrilateral, so it's got four sides. A rhombus is our first parallelogram, and in a rhombus, all four sides are congruent. So what makes it a rhombus is that the four sides are congruent, which means that they're all the same. So like if this is X inches, this is X inches, this is X inches, this is X inches. In a rectangle, which hopefully you're familiar with, that one we learn a lot about in the younger grades especially, it's a parallelogram and it makes it a rectangle because it has four right angles. So a parallelogram with four right angles is a rectangle. Remember, we mark the rectangle, the right angles with the square. So 90 degrees for each of those makes it a rectangle. Now a square is a rectangle, but it has all four congruent sides. So a square is a parallelogram. It has the four right angles and it has the four congruent sides. So a square is technically a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square because a rectangle has pairs of congruent sides. So these two sides are congruent and then these two sides are congruent, but in a square, the four sides are congruent and you have four right angles. Couple more parallelogram facts. So in all parallelograms, opposite sides are congruent. So we know that about rectangles, but that's actually true about all parallelograms. Because both sides are parallel sides, it's two sets of parallel sides, which means that they're equidistant apart for each pair. And so each opposite sides are congruent. And since these lines are parallel and these lines are parallel, that means like if you look at this parallel lines and you cut this, it makes this angle. And then this line over here is parallel. And so it makes this angle, and they're gonna meet those parallel lines at the same angle. And so opposite angles are congruent. So we could say that angle P and angle R are congruent, and then angle Q and angle S are congruent. Remember, the word opposite means across. So opposite means across. Opposite sides are congruent, which means that like side QR, it's a segment, is going to be congruent to side PS segment. And then opposite angles. So angle Q is going to be congruent to angle S, and angle R is going to be congruent to angle P. And then consecutive angles are supplementary. Remember, the word consecutive means that they are right next to each other. So that would be like angle P and angle Q. And remember, the word supplementary means that they add to 180 degrees. So you could say that P and Q add to 180, or any of the other consecutive pairs like Q and R would add to 180. R and S would add to 180. S and P would add to 180. So consecutive means that they are right next to each other. And then for a parallelogram, to find the area, it's B times H. So that's area equals, and its base times height. And just a reminder though, when you find the height in a parallelogram, you have to find the height that is perpendicular with the base. So we have in a parallelogram, we sometimes have these slanted sides. This would be called the slant height, and you can't use the slant height to find the area. It has to be the height from top to bottom or a perpendicular distance from the base. So base times height gives us the area, but just make sure that you are using the correct height. In a rhombus, all parallelogram facts, so that means that opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary, area is base times height again. Remember that you got to do the height has to be the perpendicular distance, and then the base is the distance from the whole base. And if it was turned on its side, you could also find the height this way. Oh, how am I gonna show that? Oh, I can't really show that way. Okay, never mind. And then it also has all four sides are congruent. So that's what makes it a rhombus. So it has all the same facts and then also the four congruent sides, which is similar to a square, but remember the rhombus is like a slanted square. So it has the slants. A square has all four congruent sides, but four right angles. And then consecutive angles are also supplementary in a rhombus. In a rectangle, it has all the parallelogram facts. So opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary, area is base times height, and all four angles are 90 degrees. So a rectangle, all four angles are 90 degrees. The opposite sides are congruent, so those two are congruent, and then those two are congruent. And then, of course, we have the square, which has all the parallelogram facts. So opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles add to 180. It also has four congruent sides. It has four congruent angles. And area, again, is base times height. And in this one, the sides would be the base and the height. And you can turn that either way for that shape. All right, so just looking at our quadrilaterals and then deciding if it's a parallelogram, a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square. Be as specific as possible and state why. So I have a hard time saying that word, but okay. So our first example here, we have a square because we have right angles and all four sides are congruent. In a parallelogram, we know that opposite sides are congruent or opposite angles are congruent. So if that angle here is 90, that means that this angle is 90. Or we know that consecutive angles add up to 180. And so these two have to add to 180, so 90 and 90. So we know that it is a square. It's four congruent sides and four 90-degree angles. That's what makes it a square. All right, so this one is 91 degrees. So we know that this one down here would be 91 degrees, and then the consecutive angles have to add up to 180. So that would mean that these two are 89 degrees. And so that tells me that it is not a rectangle and it's not a square because it's not 90 degrees, but it has all four sides that are the same, so it would be a rhombus. So opposite angles are congruent and four sides are the same. It's kind of that diamond shape, but it doesn't have the 90-degree angles, so it would be a rhombus. So in a rhombus, we are looking for four congruent sides, and consecutive angles are supplementary. In C, we have a rectangle. So we have opposite sides are congruent and four right angles. We don't have all four angles are congruent, or all four sides are congruent, so that's the difference between the rectangle and the square. And in the last one, we have opposite sides are congruent, but we don't have four right angles, so this would just be a parallelogram. It's similar to the rhombus shape. It has that diamond looking shape, but in a rhombus, all four sides are the same. So this one would just be a parallelogram. All right, determining the values of x and y. I think it's off just a little bit when I printed this, so hopefully your packet is printed correctly, but these directions are supposed to go down here. All right, so I have a parallelogram. I can see that these are marked as parallel and these are marked as parallel. So in a parallel, opposite sides are congruent. And if opposite sides are congruent, that means that side KL is going to be congruent to side JM, and side JK is going to be congruent to side LM. And the second fact here is going to tell me that this side and this side have to be congruent. So I can do y plus 3 is going to equal to 18. So solving for y, it's going to be y is equal to 15. And in a parallelogram, opposite angles are also congruent. So opposite angles are also congruent, which means that angle K has to be congruent to angle M, and angle J has to be congruent to angle L. And so we can use that second one again to say that 2x has to equal to 50. So dividing by 2, we're going to get x equal to 25. In a parallelogram, consecutive angles also have to be equal to 180. So we know if angle L is 50, then 180 minus 50 would be 130. And so we could find angle M. And if you knew these two, you could add them to 180 to figure out x as well. So that'd be another way to do that. If you know that this quadrilateral KLMN is a rectangle and we want to determine the value of x, given that it is an angle in the rectangle, we need to remember that in a rectangle, all of our angles are 90 degrees. In which case, we know that 2x minus 10 has to equal 90 degrees. Remember, we can tell that this is an angle measure because it is in parentheses with that little degree mark. So we add 10, we're going to get 2x is equal to 100, divide by 2, x is going to be equal to 50. X is equal to 50, when we plug it back in, the angle is equal to 90 degrees. All right. In a parallelogram, we know that opposite sides are congruent. So we know that the two top sides and bottom side here have to be the same. So that gives us 2x plus 2 equals 4. So x has to equal 2. And that means that these opposite sides, or y minus 5, has to equal 12. Or y has to equal 17. If we have a parallelogram and it is identified to be a rhombus, we need to remember that a rhombus, all of the sides are congruent, in which case the two sides that are given can be set equal to each other, and we can use that to solve for x. And so we would be able to get all of our x's on one side, and then get all of our non-x's on the other side. And we get 2x equals 17, 18, 19, 22. And divide by 2, we get x equals 11. Now if I wanted to find the length of the side, I would plug that back in. So 22 plus 17 would be 39. And that means that each of these would have a length of 39. And remember, side length is measured in linear units. And so that could be in inches or feet or centimeters or meters, but it is not the same thing as degrees. So just keep that in mind. All right, so determine the values of x, y, and z. So we got a couple options here. First, we know that opposite sides are congruent in a parallelogram. So we can use that to find x. So we know that 2x minus 3 is going to equal to 37. So we can solve this for x. We're going to add 3. And we got 2x is equal to 40. So dividing by 2 is going to give you x is equal to 20. All right, you know that a four-sided shape is going to equal 360 degrees. You can use that to figure out the angles on the inside. A couple other things that you need to remember in a parallelogram is that the opposite angles are going to be the same. So that means that L and N are going to be congruent. And so the measure of angle Y is going to equal 123 degrees, or Y degrees is equal to 123 degrees, so Y equals 123. And then consecutive angles like angle L and measure of angle K have to equal to 180 degrees. So that means that 123 plus z has to equal to 180. So if we take the 123 away from 180, we're going to be left with, 180 minus 120 is 60, minus 3 more would be 57. So z degrees would be 57, so z would equal 57. All right, my directions are off just a little bit. Again, this picture is supposed to go with number 7. Hoping your packet printed correctly. Sorry about that. So given this parallelogram, determine the values of x and y. So this one has the double variables, and we can see that there are 2 x's. And so we probably want to solve for x first since there's more x's. And since angles D and C contain the x variables, and those would be considered consecutive, which is next to each other, they have to add to 180 degrees. So we are going to use the fact that angle D plus the measure of angle C are consecutive angles, so add to 180. So x plus 8 plus 3x is going to equal 180. So that's going to be 4x plus 8 equals 180. Subtract 8 from both sides. We're going to get 4x equals 172. Divide by 4. Get x is equal to, okay, so I know that 4 times 4 is 16. So 4 times 40 would be 160. And I'm going to need 12 more to get to 172. So that'd be 4 times 3. So 43 altogether. Sorry, I should have used my calculator, but 43 altogether. So x is going to be 43. Then we're going to have to plug x back in to solve for y. So 43 plus 8 is going to be 51 degrees, or 43 times 3, 43 times 3, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 40 is 120, so 129. We know that those have to add up to 180, which they do. And then we know that either these 2 consecutive add to 180 or that opposite angles have to be equal. So since I did consecutive for the last one, I think I'll do opposite angles have to be equal. So angle A has to be congruent to angle C. So that means that y plus 9 has to equal the 129 degrees. So subtracting 9 would give me y equals 120. All right, then a quick review for area. So area is base times height. Remember we talked about height has to be the perpendicular from the base or form that 90-degree angle. So we got a parallelogram here, and area is going to be base times height. Opposite sides are congruent, so if the top is 8, this is also 8, and so you're going to have a base of 8 times a height of 8, and we have 8 times 5 is 40, and then it is meter times meter, which ends up being square meters. So area is measured in square units, like carpet or the paint on the wall. So you use area to remember to fill in the shape. So it's 8 meters by 5 meters, it's 40 square meters altogether. And technically, it is read as square meters instead of meters squared. All right, so area on this one is going to be 15 base times 10 and the height, which would be 150, and then it's in feet, so it's going to be square feet. And you write it as feet squared, but it's pronounced or said as square feet. All right, so we have another parallelogram here. We have the base would be 11. Then we have 2 sides given. The 10 is going to be the slant height. And we usually use the cursive L or the italicized L to represent the slant height. And just remember that you have to use the perpendicular distance from the top to the base, and so the real height is going to be 9. So for the area of this one, it's going to be 11 times 9, which is going to be 99, and then it has to be in square inches, and you're going to write that as inches squared. All right, in this one, we have opposite sides are congruent, so you know that if the top is 6.9 inches, the bottom is 6.9 inches. And so if you want the area of this shape, which would be a rectangle, you're going to take 6 times 6.9 times 2.4. So 6.9 times 2.4, you can ignore the decimals when you multiply or use a calculator to do it. So 6.9 times 2.4 is going to be 16.56. If you didn't have a calculator, just do 69 times 24. And then since there's 2 decimals or 2 numbers behind the decimal, there has to be 2 numbers behind the decimal in your final answer. And then it would be square inches. Inches squared. Since a square has all the congruent sides, it is still area is base times height, but note that you can also find area by taking sides squared, since the base and the height are the same. And 18 times 18, oh man, I'm blanking out, 256 or 324, I can't remember. 324, second guess, 324. And this would be miles, square miles. So maybe a field. All right. There's a review on area. Thanks for watching.